Good morning, everybody. My name is Deepa Srikantaiah, and I work with the Global Reading Network. And I want to invite everybody this morning to our webinar, our main webinar on materials and technology in reading. We have webinars bi-monthly, and this is the first webinar for this month. And we're going to be looking at global and national programs, as well as an initiative that's been started by the Asia Foundation. We have another webinar coming up in 2 weeks, and we'll be receiving information about that. And that'll look at some of the local opportunities and challenges for using materials and technology in reading. We hope that you'll be able to join that webinar as well. So for this webinar, we're very happy that we have 3 great speakers. Our first speaker is Zev Lowe. He's a Senior Director of Global Insights for Worldreader. He joined Worldreader at the very beginning, jumping right into Worldreader's first test pilot in Barcelona. Zev leads the Global Insights team, driving Worldreader's strategy as the organization grows and explores new ideas, and serving as lead problem solver as Worldreader tackles a series of firsts. Zev entered the world of social enterprise when he left Goldman Sachs in London to serve as a Kibo Fellow in Indonesia, and he has not looked back since. In his varied career, he has worked as an ethnographer, a software architect, and a full-time Aikido apprentice. Zev has computer science and anthropology degrees from Dartmouth College and an MBA from ESADE Business School. He is currently a PhD candidate at ESADE in social entrepreneurship and innovation. Welcome, Zev. Thank you. Purvi Shah is our next speaker. Purvi leads all of the digital projects at Pratham Books. In her 10-year association with the organization, she has handled various functions, including branding, strategy, and new initiatives. She has led Pratham Books' foray into digital projects. Her current work focuses on managing 2 platforms: Storybook, an open-source digital depository of multilingual stories for children, and Donate a Book, a unique crowdfunding platform that bridges the gap between those who need books and those who want to help provide books for children. Welcome, Purvi. Melody is our third speaker. Melody Zavala is the Director of Books for Asia, a program of the Asia Foundation that empowers underserved populations with information. Through donations of brand new books and digital content, Books for Asia helps infuse young students with an early love of reading, essential for literacy, builds knowledge in the business, legal, and science professions, sharpens vocational and research abilities, and enhances language skills to compete in the global economy. Under Melody's leadership, Books for Asia is piloting a children's digital library in Asia while continuing to donate 800,000 print books annually, reaching an estimated 9 million people in 20 countries. Before joining the Asia Foundation in 1999, Melody was the country director in Russia for Catholic Relief Services. Early in her career, she was based in CRS's Catholic Relief Services Liaison Office in Washington, D.C., and in Kolkata, India, where as a project manager, she collaborated with local partners on emergency relief and long-term development projects in 12 northeastern states. Melody earned her master's degree in international affairs from Columbia University and a bachelor's degree in political science from UCLA. Welcome, Melody. So thank you so much to the 3 panelists for joining us today. I just wanted to inform all the participants of a few things. If your mic is on, we would ask you to mute yourself so that there is no background noise while the participants are speaking. In addition, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in either the chat or the Q&A box, and we'll try to respond to them as soon as possible if it's a technology question. If it's a question for the presenters, we'll be gathering all of the questions at the end of the presentation, and we'll have presenters will have an opportunity to answer the questions. So thank you so much, and without further ado, we'll hand it over to Zev.
Good morning, afternoon, and evening to everybody. Thank you so much for calling in today. Thank you so much to Deepa for that wonderful introduction. I feel very privileged to be here today. As Deepa said, I'm the Senior Director of Global Insights for Worldreader, which is an organization that harnesses the power of digital technology in support of a vision of a world where everyone can be a reader. Briefly, Worldreader curates over 40,000 ebooks from hundreds of publishers throughout the world. We have this collection of digital books in more than 40 different languages, and we use technology like mobile phones and e-readers to get people reading all over the world. We started in sub-Saharan Africa with reading programs for children in the first 3 grades of school, and now we work throughout the reading spectrum from very, very young children to adults. In Africa, we have a program in India as well, and now we're expanding even beyond that globally. Worldreader has 4 major programs. They are pre-reading, school reading, library reading, and lifelong reading. So the characteristics of these programs are different, and there are some examples on the screen. So I won't read the slides to you, but briefly, our pre-reading programs focus on getting parents and caregivers to read to young children, many of whom may be pre-literate. We have a school reading program as well, which focuses on students who need to acquire literacy, typically in their first few years of primary school. We also work with public and community libraries. Right now, we are scaling up to reach every single public library in Kenya by the middle of next year. And we also have a lifelong reading program that reaches individuals, typically aged 16 and up, who already have mobile phones and are eager to read. And we provide them with a wide variety of content. One of the reasons why we work digitally is because through the power of technology, even being a relatively small organization, we've been able to reach more scale than we believe we'd be able to if we only worked with paper books. So for example, if you look at the yellow line here, it shows that as of last year, Worldreader had about 6 million people, more than 6 million people have read using digital technology through Worldreader. And the blue line here shows that our reach is even larger. This 43 million number is actually the people who have been curious about Worldreader's reading applications enough to come and visit us, or come and download our app, or come and open our reading application on their phones, but they have not yet progressed to the point where they are actually reading books. This to us shows that even though we have reached more than 6 million people who have read, our potential reach is actually much wider. There are people who have come in and been curious, and now we just have to convert them into readers. One of the cornerstones of Worldreader's work surrounds partnerships with publishers. We work, as you can see, with some global giants here, like Cambridge, like Penguin Random House, like Simon & Schuster. And our model there is, for them, the marginal cost of donating a digital book is 0, and so they've very generously allowed us to use their books in our programs at no cost. And that's absolutely wonderful. We love that. And we also recognize that if we really want to get people excited about reading, it's really important that we have books that reflect their culture and that are in languages that they speak at home. And so in support of that, we work with publishers in the countries where we have readers that we serve. So this includes Kenya Literature Bureau, Kwani, Longhorn in Kenya, Smartline in Ghana, and many, many more. There are almost 400 publishers that we work with now. And when the publishers that we partner with come from the Global South, we recognize that in order to cultivate a vibrant reading culture, what we need to do is help them create sustainable financial models for digital books. So we've done capacity building to help them go digital, and also we compensate them for the books that we use in our program. So we have 2 slightly different models that we use. Together, our publishing partners have managed to help us amass more than 40,000 digital titles in over 70 genres, more than 40 languages throughout the world. So now that I've given you a super quick overview of Worldreader and some of our partnerships and programs, I'd like to show you a very short video.
go to school, I don't have to carry many books. I can use even the e-reader. The e-reader is easy to carry, but the books are very heavy.
This thing has so many advantages against what we are using currently. The e-reader has 300 books in it. You carry it, just one in your hands. The books here with the weather don't last as long. Instead of buying more storybooks, you bring in more through the technology that you have there.
A country like ours, where most of the population live below $1 a day, and most books cost about $4 or $5, and suddenly we're able to avail thousands of books costing much lower, maybe cents, then that makes a big difference, especially to the education system.
The education is important to me in life because I would like to be a teacher. If you would like to be a teacher, you should go to a college of teachers. So reading is important to me.
Now I'd like to zoom out a little bit and talk about digital reading more broadly. These are some of the reasons why we believe in the promise of digital. First, there are great organizations out there that have partnered with us, and many of whom are working on improving access to local and local language content. I'm not going to dwell on this point because we're lucky enough to have Purvi Shah presenting right after me, and she's going to go into the great work that Pratham Books does with Storyweaver. The second point is an interesting one for us, cost reductions. When materials have to be revised frequently, the nice thing about digital is that the cost of revising those materials does not have to include things like reprinting and redistribution. Digital materials can be amended and improved much more easily. And this is an advantage that we've managed to realize quite a number of times, especially when we're dealing with things like scripted lesson plans, which change quite a bit throughout the school year and involve a high volume of paper or many pages. The third thing is more automated data collection. Many of our publishing partners are now releasing books digitally before they actually release the paper version. And that's so that they can get some data on what people are reading, what is popular, and actually use that information to decide where to make their investments in terms of paper books. It costs quite a bit to create a print run of 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 copies of books, but with digital publishing, the costs are far lower to publish a book. And then on top of that, you really do get some data back that shows what people are actually reading. This is also invaluable to us in our reading programs. Fourthly, accessibility. Organizations like Benetech and their Bookshare program out there have done groundbreaking work making books more accessible for people who are visually impaired or who have print disabilities. And digital, again, digital books are not inherently accessible, but it is much easier to make a digital book accessible than it is to make a print book accessible. However, it's not all about opportunities. I also do want to talk about some challenges in digital reading. First of all, I would like to say that a lot of the challenges that we thought we would face turned out to be a lot less significant than we thought since we started working in this field about 7 years ago. First, access to electricity. We now integrate with solar solutions, and we find that that isn't the barrier that we might have thought it would be. Also, access to technology is rapidly growing. We're now at the point where more than 80% of the people in the world have mobile phones, and that number is growing every day. Some of the challenges that remain, though, are front-loaded costs, and I will go into this more in the next slide. But with a digital program, it's not where one device can be loaded with hundreds of books, and then the cost of the device actually can be divided by those books, right? Unlike paper books, where you might be able to trickle the delivery of books over a long period of time, in digital programs, the costs tend to be a little more front-loaded because you have to account for the cost of the device. We'll talk about how things can be done in order to make these costs much more reasonable. For example, if the digital reading components are built into a program model from the beginning, rather than being seen as their own separate thing, there are creative ways in order to figure out how students in a classroom, for example, can share these digital devices in a way that reduces costs significantly. And I also think that as a field, we can explore financing models to reduce the burden of these front-loaded costs. Secondly, risk, especially when it comes to damage and e-waste. Worldreader understands this very well. When we first started working, devices were much more fragile than they were today. We still had yet to learn many of the things that we now know about training programs and about really helping students and teachers understand how to take care of their devices. We've also, along the years, developed partnerships with an e-waste partner to make sure that we are caring for the planet as we go about our work. And I'm pleased to say that at this point, we've been able to estimate an under 2% breakage rate every year, and that's due to technology getting more robust and also training getting smarter. Third, the field in general needs to converge on a format for digital books as well as on copyright standards. Really quickly, when there are materials that are published for a particular reading program, there have to be copyright notices that are on the books. Without those, other people cannot come along and figure out if they have the permissions to use the books, if they have the permissions to build on top of the books. We're now at the point where government-funded projects, U.S. government-funded projects, have to be made openly licensed, have to be put in the public domain. But I think in the field in general, we need a little bit more consensus on how we go about putting that into practice. So in other words, making sure copyright notices or the fact that we're choosing not to copyright a particular work, that those are clearly visible on the materials that we put out. So here's a little bit of an analysis that Worldreader has done, and this is basically looking at the fact that there are two major variables for the cost per book in any particular reading program. And those two variables are how many years we expect the program length to be, and how many students might be able to use a particular device. When we talk about sharing, there are different options for sharing. It could involve sharing simultaneously, where two students sit around the same digital reading device. But it could also involve things that we have seen in our classrooms where, for example, there are two streams. There might be a morning and an afternoon stream. And the devices move from the morning stream to the afternoon stream. That makes it possible for two students to use one device, but of course at different times. So The device durability, the increasing durability of devices, is what allows us to estimate the length of a program all the way up to 5 years. And our data shows that these are the average cost. These come from actual Worldreader programs. And when I say fully burdened, what I mean here is that it includes staff time, it includes training costs, shipping, absolutely everything. And you can see that the cost per book ranges widely depending on the program model. It could be as expensive as $1.68 per book if each student has their own device, and if the program is set to run only for 1 year, or it could get as cheap as 8 cents per book. And these are based on the assumption that each device holds 100 books, which is minimal, actually. The devices can hold up to thousands, but in our programs that we have analyzed, we've assumed about 100 books per device. So this is just to show that even though there is a perception that digital reading is expensive, that need not necessarily be the case. So I'd like to move on to the future of work in the field. And we outline 4 things that we think that digital reading needs in order to scale up even further. First, we would love to see more investment in cost-effectiveness studies on digital. Not just cost studies, which is measuring the inputs, but actually cost-effectiveness studies, which is looking at outcomes. Second, capacity building at the government level and among local digital content creators and publishers. We have delved into this with our publishing partners, but it's also become more obvious to us that if this is something that needs to scale, while we might initially think that it's students that require the most capacity building, that require the most training, it turns out that young children actually take to technology like fish to water, and it's actually us grown-ups that require the capacity building. Third, I've talked a little bit about consensus around licensing. But there also needs to be consensus around formatting. The format that most digital reading content creators are converging around is the EPUB 3 standard, which provides a lot of accessibility features that were not previously available. However, there are still a lot of challenges. For example, Worldreader is now starting to work in Arabic because we have a pre-reading program that is starting soon that's going to be focused on Syrian refugees in Jordan. And we've been wrestling with the fact that Arabic books, Arabic is only supported up to EPUB 2. So there's still a little work that has to be done there. Also, when I spoke earlier about how we compensate our local publishing partners for their work, we'd like to see a little more work around creative licensing. So how can we continue to support openly licensed models while providing a way for publishers and authors and illustrators to continue to make a living doing the great work that they do that we want to encourage. Finally, further research on technical investment. USAID has a global reading repository that they're currently investigating. The truth is, at this point, we don't quite know what the long-term archiving costs of digital materials will be, especially when technology changes and we have to then update those materials to the latest standards. So we think that that's another area in which we as a field need to be aware of and need to start investing in. So to conclude my presentation, the future is digital. The world is going digital. Here we can see on the top left, Opera software has helped Worldreader get our books on their browsers, which compress data and make them available on feature phones. So you don't have to have a smartphone to read. That's great. On the top right-hand corner, you see some of the digital books that are put out there by our publishing partners, and you can see that these are publishing partners from sub-Saharan Africa who have realized the promise of digital publishing. On the bottom left-hand side, you'll see work done by UNESCO. There's a great report that they put out called Reading in the Mobile Era. And this shows the promise of digital reading and the fact that many people are doing it all over the world every single day. Men, women, mobile readers who are reading to children, et cetera, et cetera. This is a trend that is growing. And in the bottom right, you'll see a number of students at one of the schools that we serve in Kenya, in Western Kenya, and they have a solar panel behind them that is powering the devices that they are using to read. As I look at their smiling faces, I feel optimism for the future of digital reading, and I thank you all for listening to me present. Here's my contact information. Some of the reports and documents that I referenced during this presentation are available at the link that you can see here.
Thank you so much, Zev, for that wonderful presentation. We're going to move on to Purvi now. And thank you for the questions that have been coming in. We'll address that at the end of all three presentations.
So hi everyone, I'm Purvi from Pratham Books, and I'm here to talk about how open licenses and collaboration are helping us build an ecosystem for early reading materials. So Pratham Books is a not-for-profit organization that's based out of India. We're actually a children's book publisher, and we publish high-quality, affordable children's books in over 18 Indian languages. Andre, can you go to the next slide, please? Over the last 13 years, we've distributed over 14 million books. And we really started open licensing our content in 2008, which was way ahead of its time, especially in children's books publishing, and even more way ahead of its time in India. It's only very recently that we've actually launched a platform that houses all of our openly licensed content. And the idea really is to connect content creators and users and create this participatory culture so that we create a large reading repository of localized reading material. So Storyweaver actually takes Pratham Books' mission of creating Pratham Books' mission of creating equitable access to reading resources by using technology as a force multiplier. We've actually put a bunch of features on Storyweaver. So on the platform, users can read stories for free, and you can read it on your desktop, you can read it on your mobile, you can read it on your tablet. Until now, we've migrated 50% of all our content onto the platform, and the idea is that by the end of this year, to actually migrate all of our legacy content and eventually become a digital-first organization, where most of our openly licensed content first gets onto Storyweaver. On the platform, you can also create stories, and this is a tool that we've actually embedded for educators, resource people. So we've uploaded 5,000 images. So if you come on Storyweaver and you can't find a book of your choice or a book on the topic that you want to use in your class, you can actually create your own reading material. And even more interesting is that if you can't find material in the language that you work with, you can even translate the books online. And that's really where we've seen the most traction. And I'll talk a little bit more about it as we go ahead. But for educators, there's another interesting tool called Relevel, because educators work across grades within the education system. So if an educator finds a reading level 3 book, which the story is really nice, but there is a lot of text for a child who's in grade 1 or grade 2 to read, the educator actually has the option to take the entire story and make it much more simpler and easier for the children that she's working with. And all of the material that's on the platform is free for use for downloading as well as printing. So Zev talked about EPUBs, and we work very closely with Worldreader, and initially we were at EPUB 2, but we've just moved to EPUB 3, which is now the gold standard in publishing, and has a lot of accessibility features, as Zev talked about. So educators can actually download a high-res PDF, a low-res PDF, or an EPUB, and we've actually customized the printing solution to A4. So if schools have a local printing machine or access to a local printing machine, they can actually print out a whole storybook, and we have tons of libraries in India actually who are actually using this feature. And of course, all of this is available under the most liberal CC BY 4.0 license. Can I have the next slide, please? So among the many stories that I will tell today, one that I cite at every presentation is a story about a story written by Anushka Ravi Shankar, and the places it traveled and the languages it spoke. So it's All the Cat's Fault was published as an openly licensed book on Storyweaver the day it was launched, and this was just a year and a half back. And I really want to show what open licenses and what the digital platform and collaboration can do to a single story in just 20 months. The next slide, please. So basically, this one story has been versioned 54 times on the platform in 32 languages and has got over 16,000 reads. So we launched Storyweaver in 24 languages, with 800 stories in 24 languages, and today we are at 3,500 stories in 69 languages. And this is all due to our wonderful, wonderful collaborative community. We have over 200,000 users, a readership of over 1 million, 100,000 downloads, and we're actually accessed from over 190 countries from the world. So we have various user segments that come onto the platform. We have literacy organizations that have reading programs that create reading comprehension modules. We've seen some teachers in the classroom even come and take the images and do creative writing workshops with children, and some that actually use it for curriculum support. We have a lot of STEM books as well. In India, we've also seen some government programs use our books in their reading programs. There are a lot of textbook publishers like HarperCollins who've pulled off content from Storyweaver and done activity books as part of their textbooks as well. We've had a lot of app developers take content from the platform and preload it on their devices. We've also had an organization that actually takes stories from Storyweaver and does remote distance learning through Skype sessions. We had an interesting audio story initiative sometime back where children could give a missed call, and we would call them back with audio stories in Hindi and English. And this actually happened in the child's home environment, and it was a fairly successful pilot where in over a week we got over 37,000 missed calls. So over 37,000 stories were heard. We've also seen a new market develop because of open licensing content. We've seen local entrepreneurs taking content out and actually printing and selling it, which is fairly amazing, because to see this content move far and wide beyond where Pratham Books through its print work could have originally reached is very, very, very encouraging. There are a lot of publishers, not large-scale national level publishers, but local publishers that actually curate content from Storyweaver, and we've actually worked together with them to ensure that attribution is in place and they finally print and sell. We also work with Benetech Foundation and Bookshare, and they work with reading disabilities and visually impaired children, and they use our EPUBs to create audiobooks as well. And lastly, Worldreader mentioned that they use us, the African Storybook Project, Asia Foundation uses us, Melody is next, and I'm sure she'll have a fantastic presentation and lovely stories to share as well. But basically, if as a publisher, and Zev mentioned this in his appeal, that if publishers started open licensing content, one can actually have a much wider impact on reading across the world, and it's great for us to see that our work is being used and picked up by so many different organizations and in so many different ways. One of the reasons why Storyweaver is so successful is because it's all about nurturing the ecosystem, and I think we have our eyes on all the various stakeholders within the ecosystem and what we can do for them, and how is it that we are, what is it that we are offering so that we are relevant to them at all points in time. by giving these various tools on the platform, what we've actually done is that we've empowered teachers across the world. So one is, if you find stories that are relevant on the platform, use them the way you want. We actually had we've actually had one use case here in rural India, where there is this organization that's taken our stories and distributed them via SD cards on mobiles to their area coordinators, and these are the project coordinators who actually go back to the villages with 30, 40, 50 stories on their mobile and do reading sessions with children in those rural areas. So educators really find their own ways of using the platform the way it suits them, sometimes offline, sometimes online. The other is that if you don't find the content that you're looking for, you can always create resources that you want. We've had teachers create flashcards, we've had teachers create, use wordless books as well. So lots of use cases. One of the interesting things that we actually saw happen very organically is so we actually conduct these regional workshops in India with the educator community, where we actually teach them how to use Storyweaver, how to create create resources on Storyweaver, curate reading lists. And one of the exciting things that we heard back from the field after the very first workshop that we conducted about 18 months back is that these teachers in rural Maharashtra who attended the workshop, government public school teachers, they went back to their districts and collected teachers from all the neighboring schools and actually created, redid the entire workshop that we did with them. And this really became an idea for, creating what we now call master trainers, where we create where we give the training to certain teachers, and then they can take our work forward with teachers that they work with or they know of. We've also recently activated an institutional download facility where educators who often come on the platform and need large amounts of books can actually come in, and rather than having to download book by book, can actually come in and download 20, 30 books. So actually, reading materials for the next 3-4 months, with a one-time click button. And what's also interesting is that for these stakeholders, we've even given additional download facilities. So educators could download only images, they could download only text, they can download PDFs, they can download a whole bunch of formats. And eventually we hope that based on their usage patterns on the site, every time there is new relevant content within those genres, within those reading levels, and within those languages, we will send them instant notifications to download the new books that have been populated on the site. So this is a really interesting use case that we came across. I'd met Christopher from NORAD at a USAID conference a year back, and he was part of the Storyweaver session. And a few months back, he conducted a workshop with 26 educators from 13 countries, and in 2 hours, these educators created 13 translations over 2 books. And I thought it was absolutely fantastic, and just shows that the platform is so easy to use that within 2 hours, you can have just so many variations of a single book. And I was just absolutely blown away by the languages that were created, and you can see some of those mentioned on the screen below. Educator, if you're a translator, please do come on board and use the platform. It's very, very easy to use. I want to share 2 more stories from educators on the ground, which I thought were very interesting. The first one is a tweet that came in from an organization that works with children who speak Surjapuri, which is a lesser-known dialect in West Bengal in India. And this is the children's reaction when they saw these books. Field-tested Surjapuri stories. Children were confused and amazed at reading a book in their own dialect, because these children had never ever seen a book in Surjapuri. So to actually hold a book in the language that they speak at home, I'm sure was an amazing, amazing feeling. And this is where the educators actually translated online and downloaded and and used the A4 printing modality to create books. And the next one is an equally inspiring story. Yeah, so the screenshot on the right of the screen is again an inspiring story of a police officer that's posted in a Naxalite area in Odisha's most backward district, and he downloaded Odia books, and he again took black and white prints, and he started reading sessions, and he talks about, you know, how this is like a tiny step in education, in empowerment, and he hopes to now take this model across the other districts in Odisha as well. So educators are one part of the ecosystem. The other part is actually the publishing ecosystem. There's only so much material that Pratham Books can create in 1 year and populate on Storyweaver. So we are always looking actively at publishers who want to partner with us. We've not had a lot of success because, as Zev mentioned, that there isn't a lot of material available under Creative Commons licenses, or publishers aren't really willing to release content under Creative Commons licenses. But if there are any publishers out there, or there is any material out there that's created and you'd like to migrate to the Storyweaver platform, please reach out to us. We've actually had a bunch of wonderful books from African Storybook Project, from Book Dash. We've actually even partnered with the Asia Foundation, where we've given them publisher rights on the platform, and they've created Khmer translations of some of our books on the platform, and they've given back to the platform as well as used those books on their own platform. And I think that's such a beautiful way of collaborating and creating more local language content. The other interesting thing that's happened in the last 15-18 months of Storyweaver is that we've actually started discovering talent on the platform. So there is one story that's being picked up by a publisher who's actually going to print. So this is a user-generated content, a community story that we really loved, and we actually publicized it heavily on our social media channels. And a publisher in India has actually picked up that story for commissioning and printing in the coming years. We've also, as a publisher, struggled for high-quality translators in languages. And we are now using the platform to identify users who are translating very heavily on the platform, and then we do quality checks around those translations. And once we feel that the quality is great, we actually give commissioned work to some of those translators. We've also seen a use case where we've seen a local entrepreneur pick up stories, and he's now planning to print and sell these commercially. Textbook publishers are tapping into the repository. And we've also seen a lot of reading assessment tools being developed using the site. And I think this is very interesting because the site has multilingual content. So if an agency actually finds a English reading level 1 story, and typically a couple of paragraphs from that story are picked up for creating the reading assessment tool, we've seen these agencies pick up the same story in Hindi, which is available in the platform, and use the same paras to use in the assessment work that they do. And lastly, the language ecosystem. I want to quickly tell you that 40% of all the new languages that are added onto the platform is at the request of users, which actually tells us that there is a huge dearth in minority languages, in endangered languages, in tribal languages, even in popular languages, to have high quality open license reading material, which is why we are seeing this explosion of stories in languages. And 60% of all the translations on the platform is actually user generated content, and 15% is from tribal, endangered, and minority languages. What we've also done selectively here in India is we've worked with an organization that created a reading library of 60 stories in Santali and Kora, 2 tribal languages. And they came back to us to see if they could print these stories with us, and we actually took the translations from Storyweaver, took them offline, and when the Pratham Books print team actually recreated that material in offset printing, optimized material, and about 10,000 of these books are now currently being shipped to these children. We are also creating a lot of material to nurture the talent. So a lot of videos, tutorials, and master classes are being put up through our social media channels. So I want to talk real quickly about Mohammad Reza Bahadur. He wrote in to us to actually activate Southern Kurdish onto the platform, and he's created stories in Southern Kurdish in the Latin script and the Arabic script. And he's the goal for him is, because Southern Kurdish is categorized as an endangered language, he's keen to translate these stories to promote literacy in the language, to preserve the language, and to also create a rich corpus of literature in the language. And closer home, we've seen that happen with Sanskrit and many, many other languages as well. Going forward, we're actually looking at creating strong partnerships with language groups so that we can ensure that we have a high quality reading material in languages on the platform. And we've been very fortunate to create some of these partnerships with local organizations, some with Rosetta, Translators Without Borders, Asia Foundation again. Yeah, so the idea really is to create an ecosystem that can address the book famine that is there in mother tongue languages. So we will keep populating the platform with high quality publisher content. Use Storyweaver as a platform to create a collaborative framework where translators can come and create translations. Educators can then take the content out and distribute it in offline modes, and we'll always rely on community to help us achieve this goal. Thank you, and the last has my email ID if any of you would like to reach out to me, as well as the URL to Storyweaver.
I'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much. It's great to be on this illustrious panel. It's a love fest here. We all have so much respect for each other, and really appreciate the pioneering work of Pratham and Worldreader in this space. So I'd like to say that, Let's Read is a new initiative really within the last year for the Asia Foundation. We've been keeping an eye on this space for quite a while and waiting to define where we think we can make our best contribution. So it's a new initiative for us that uses technology to accelerate the creation, distribution, and use of children's books. Let's Read features a free digital library and reader apps, original mother tongue content, and it's a community-driven translation engine. It's really an end-to-end solution and approach to address the critical shortage of quality reading material in developing Asia. Our approach focuses on community, content, and access, three interconnecting components that I'll describe in a minute. These are custom-built tools created by the Asia Foundation. They're mobile first because, as we know, smartphone use in Asia is growing by leaps and bounds. Let's Read's designed for low bandwidth environments, and it's built using open source code. As I said, it's built on really the pioneering efforts of Pratham and Worldreader, and we're all working to promote digital content as a means of improving access to books, and we're looking forward to making large contributions in this space, especially in Asia. So I'll mention, one of our main components here is community. You might get the sense that Let's Read is solely a technology solution, but really at its heart, it's an initiative in community development. The Asia Foundation is a community development organization, and so our approach to any problem and any development challenge is to work with local stakeholders to identify the barriers and develop an approach to overcome those choke points and empower people with skills and tools that are needed to effect long-lasting change. So therefore, our technology focus is on collaborative tools that empower and engender community participation and increases the capacity to create and use content within a community. And then it's also really through our networks and the 18 offices on the ground in Asia and our staff's real first mile and last mile relationships that we're able to collaborate and make sure the books that get created get used. Where there isn't a strong community, we can foster it. And the photo here is from a Let's Read ebook hackathon workshop, which brings together members of the publishing community to create children's books where gaps in content exist, and builds bridges between the publishing and technology communities. This community approach, based approach, we really feel is especially effective for last mile, reaching that last mile of use. So let me also talk about content. The Let's Read library features a mix of openly licensed indigenous and international storybooks, all of which can be read in a child's mother tongue. A major component of the library is original content from within cultures. And we source that content in 2 ways. So here's a look at what the Let's Read library looks like. And now I'd like to show you what the ebook hackathons look like. At those hackathons, we bring together local authors, illustrators, and publishing communities to create original, compelling books. These are 1- to 2-day events, and during that, sets of original in-language books are created. At the same time, our participants receive training on children's book best practices. And this model really draws on and is adapted from Book Dash's model, which works with professional writers and illustrators, and we adapted it for non-professionals in the cultures where we're working. And we also drew on Room to Read's longer writer and illustrator training. So we put those together and we came up with the ebook hackathons. They're public events, and so they really serve to raise the profile of children's books and the amazing talent behind them. The covers you see on the screen are for some of the books that were created at ebook hackathons in Cambodia since last September. And at the end of this video, I'll provide a link where you can see videos and find out more about those ebook hackathons. We also collaborate with local organizations to digitize their existing print children's books. So, for example, one of our partners in northern Thailand, the Foundation for Applied Linguistics, had many titles that they had created to fill a gap. And so we worked with them to train them to digitize 50 of those titles and upload them into the library, so now they can reach the broader language community. Ska Karen is a minority language in Southeast Asia, and so you know, there are many Ska Karen in villages in northern Thailand, along the borders, many in Myanmar, and so eventually we hope that these titles will be accessible to all. At the same time, any book in the library can be adapted to local context through our pioneering translation app. This is a cost-effective option to quickly expand mother tongue collections. Our app crowdsources the translations from community members and utilizes collaborative tools and a peer review system to streamline and localize the editorial process. This screenshot is a Let's Read translation tool, shows the Ska Karen book in the process of being translated. And so community translator is really anyone with facility in 2 languages, not a professional. And they can translate as little or as much as they want, 1 page, the entire book. They can do it from anywhere via mobile phone or any other device. And what happens then is here you can see the contributions of multiple translators being aggregated into a single view for a community editor who chooses from the available translations or draws from them to create one of his or her own that's even better, and pulls all those together and pushes publish. So in this way, high quality, culturally representative translations that really pull on the contributions of many people, especially important in languages that have not been written for as long, or where language and certain words are still getting established. So to give you an example of how quick this is, this can happen very quickly. In 6 weeks, we had about 30 books in English in there, and within 6 weeks, they grew to over 150 books in 5 languages and scripts, with a very small group of about 20 people logging on to translate. I'd like to also talk about the last component, which is access. As you know, communities have different needs and situations, so we've set up Let's Read to provide multiple ways to engage with content. The books can be read on our Android app, mobile app. They can be read online through web browser, or printed for non-digital environments. The cutting-edge mobile technology was used to ensure that the reading experience is as seamless as possible in low-bandwidth environments. And to ensure access down to community level, we are collaborating with local organizations on community-based reading programs. For example, a Reading Oak program being implemented by our indigenous partner in northern Thailand involves Saturday reading camps and relies on a mix of print books and mobile phone access. Over the next few development cycles, we will be expanding accessibility features so the library can benefit more people with disabilities and learning impairments. And again, like our other speakers mentioned, drawing on the important work that Benetech and others have done in that area. So I think in conclusion, I'll just really say that our platform is in the early stages of development, really still in beta, but we're excited about its potential. Collaboration is in our DNA, and we'd love to speak with you. Anyone who thinks that Let's Read could enhance your work that you're already doing, that's really how it's going to scale. My email address is here, and our library address is there as well, www.letsreadasia.org. There are apps available from the Play Store, so we welcome you to take a look at that. And also there's a video link there that really shows you what a hackathon looks like. So I think I'll just leave it there. I'm sure we're running out of time, but thank you so much, everyone, and we really look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, Melody, for that great presentation. And also thank you again to all the panel members. We're actually going to unmute all of you so that we can ask you the questions that have been sent through the chat. And we have 4 questions, and I'm going to give you 2 questions first that can be answered by everybody, and then there's 2 questions specifically for Zev on Worldreader's work. So the first question is from Samantha, and this is for all panel members. Is there any movement to connect with educators in the U.S., Canada, or European countries, teachers who could access multicultural content and could be a source of funds for Worldreader or Pratham Books? The second question is from Tony Boone. He says, many of you are aware of the Global Book Alliance initiative and several working groups. If you had to pick one activity to recommend for the Global Book Alliance advancement with respect to your experiences in digital reading, what would it be? And we have 2 questions specifically for Zev on Worldreader. One is where can a sample of Worldreader be accessed? And also, do you have a similar experience with Arabic language and with countries from the Arab world of using Worldreader? 1 to 2 minutes to answer, and then any other questions that come through, I'm going to write them down, and we'll definitely get them answered offline. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the wonderful questions. I'll try to answer them. I'll try to answer all of them really quickly. To people who want to know more about Worldreader's programs or who want to potentially collaborate with us, I'd encourage you to send me an email. We've found that digital reading programs are most effective if they're baked into a program from the start, rather than thinking of digital books as something a vendor can provide. So in order to really kind of collaborate at the programmatic level, do drop me an email, and if I'm not the right person, I'll direct you to the right person on our team. To the question from Abdullah Shekari about whether we have similar experiences with the Arabic language and with countries from the Arab world, that is a part of the world where we have only recently started to work. I think that it's a very different environment from sub-Saharan Africa, so the challenges, some of the challenges are common and some of the challenges are very specific. As I mentioned, one of the challenges about working in Arabic is specifically that Arabic books are in EPUB 2 format. We also have had some challenges around the way that pages turn. Certainly, if you have any advice for us, I'd love to connect offline. With regards to Samantha's question about movements to connect with educators, we have done this on a sort of ad hoc basis. I don't know that we specifically have a program to connect with educators in the US and Canada or in European countries, but we've certainly found that some educators in these countries have really benefited from the books from some of our publishing partners, including, I'm sure, Storyweaver, because then they've been able to introduce materials into their classrooms that are from different contexts, and they can just open their minds of their students. In response to Tony's question, if I had to pick one activity to recommend for the Global Book Alliance initiative, it would be a cost-effectiveness study of digital books at scale.
Hi, everyone. I'll try to wrap this up real quick as well. To Samantha's question, again, Samantha, because our focus is more India in terms of partnerships, we've not proactively reached out for any structured relationships, but we've actually had tons and tons of use cases where educators from across, including the continents and the areas that you talked about, have actually come on the platform and created content. Specifically, a teacher, a primary school teacher in France who's actually created over 40 French books on the platform, and she's actually taking this into her classrooms. So actually many such examples like that. To the question on and what would be the one recommendation, I would really say that if anybody can pull this off, it's actually the Alliance. So if you could get more publishers to release content under the CC-BY 4.0 license, or if there's material that USAID has created over the last so many years and the strong work that they've done, if they could, convince their partners to release the work under CC-BY, because that would actually be the nucleus that springs much of the work that we are doing right now, that Asia Foundation hopes to do with their Let's Read library, that African Storybook Project does. So, it would actually give a jump to the high quality content that we build upon. And I wanted to quickly react to there was a query on Arabic and the work done there. I'm not sure if this is very relevant, but we actually have a lot of books in Farsi, Arabic, Urdu. So if you'd like to potentially come help us create more content, and our platform is also responsive, so available on mobile as well. And very soon, by the end of this year, we're going to have an offline version. So you can also read these books in an offline mode. So please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
This is Melody. I expect you want me to jump in also. Regarding reaching out to the U.S., Canada, continental U.S. or North America, we haven't quite done that yet, but we're working towards that. I can see situations where it would be fantastic to engage with especially diaspora communities, both in terms of making the library available to them. I mean, it's available to them now, but making them more aware of it, to utilize it, because that is, access to mother tongue content is an issue everywhere when you're out of your own mother country. But also I can see potentially even doing ebook hackathons in places where there's large diaspora communities to create new content. And I can also see engaging with diaspora communities to encourage their participation in using the translation tool. So those are some ways that I could see a mutually beneficial relationship there that we'll need to do some outreach around. The other question I would comment on is, Tony, thanks for the question about the Global Book Alliance, and I think we're all excited about the idea. There's a lot of cooperation that goes on behind the scenes between all of our organizations, and we're all working towards the same goal, and I think the Global Digital Library will be a great way to pull it together. If I had to choose one thing, I would really push for funding to help with content creation. And the reason being for that is it's pretty labor intensive. And once the books are created, they can get into the various platforms and into the Global Digital Library, and just the exponential effect of all the languages they can go to and the people they can reach is phenomenal. But that early piece, that first mile of content creation is pretty labor intensive, but very important. It's very important for to have content created within countries and not only externally. It really affirms the value, especially with minority language cultures, and preserves those minority languages and gets their stories out there too for them to see and for others to see. It really contributes to diversity in books. So I would say that really. And then also, how much it really would benefit the Global Digital Library as well, because as a search that really will link to all of these libraries. If we were all getting more original content in there, then again, that exponential effect through the Global Digital Library would be phenomenal.
Melody, if you wouldn't mind, I know we're short on time, but I just want to tack on one thing to what you said, which was wonderful.
Sure.
I want to underscore that, this really is a love fest. Purvi, Melody, and I have known each other for a while and have a lot of respect for each other's work. So it's been a real pleasure to talk to you. I would like to tack on to your recommendation to Tony. We've done, especially with Pratham Books and Storyweaver, we've done a lot of work on the back end to kind of integrate how those books come into our platform. And I think that, there are a lot of informal collaborations or sort of one-to-one collaborations all over our space where we're actually creating these pipes where we can funnel content into platforms and make those pieces of content more discoverable on platforms. And so, Tony, as you're thinking about Melody's idea, which is to fund more content creation, we couldn't agree more with that. An expansive view, I think, would be really helpful, where it's not just about content creation, but also about how do we build these APIs? How do we build these pipes to allow content to integrate? How can Worldreader open up some of our content to other applications? How can content be more easily ingested and discovered by users? Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for your responses to the questions, and also thank you for the additional questions that are coming through. Unfortunately, our time is short, but we will answer those questions offline and either post it on our website or post it in our blog. Thank you again for the presenters, Zev, Purvi, and Melody, for taking time today and being on this panel. Your presentations were very informative, and it was a great discussion afterwards as well. And we look forward to engaging with you further on this topic. Thank you again, everybody, and please do contact us at the Global Reading Network if you have any additional questions about this session as a webinar, or you're welcome to also contact the presenters. Thank you again, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.